COVID hospitalizations near a crisis point. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Julie Carr-Smythe, State House correspondent for the Associated Press, Bob Clegg, Republican strategist, and Desiree Tims of Innovation Ohio. Omicron is here, but Ohio health officials say it is still the Delta variant filling hospitals. The daily case rate topped 11,000 this week, the single largest day total since last winter. Each day, hundreds of Ohioans are ending up in the hospital. State officials are seriously concerned about the upcoming Christmas holiday. They worry about gatherings combined with the looming, highly contagious Omicron variant. And health officials and the experts urge everyone to get fully vaccinated, and that means the booster.
The research is showing that those who recently received a booster are demonstrating strong levels of protection against the Omicron variant. So in short, if you're eligible and haven't gotten your booster, now is the time. Omicron's here, and all signs are pointing to it being more contagious. Please protect yourself with a booster if it's due.
Julie Carr-Smythe, all signs are pointing to a difficult December and January. Just today, Friday, the governor ordered 1,000 National Guard troops to help out at hospitals. Also, OSU Medical Center here in Columbus said no elective procedures that require an overnight stay after January 3rd. So people are preparing.
Yes, I mean, it reminds you of the very beginning of the pandemic, doesn't it? It's very strange and sad, I guess, that we had hoped to be coming to an end of this and things were looking up there for a long time. But what is happening is the virus keeps getting ahead of us. You know, it just keeps on morphing. Now, we don't really know that the Omicron is particularly deadly or, you know, as mixed cases that are so bad. But at the same time, governments are just going to have to reckon with this once again. And, you know, who knows whether around the world countries are going to be shutting down again.
Yeah, Desiree Tims, I mean, it's really governors around the country are not doing anything like they did last or in the early days of this, in the spring, March of 2020. Only the governor of New York has issued a statewide mask mandate. So Democrat and Republican governors are basically saying, you know, we're going to let the experts in medicine take over here. We're not going to do any shutdowns, mandates. Is that the right way to go at this point, do you think, Desiree?
It's the incorrect way to go. And we know that from science, and physicians and nurses and people all around the world are saying, get vaccinated, wear your mask, do the right thing, and mandates work. It is, you know, not typical, but many politicians are running towards the polls and looking at public opinions instead of doing what's in the best interest of the people who they govern. And so I would hope more governors would step back up to the plate as we're seeing our hospitals overfilled with patients suffering from COVID-19 to do the right thing and institute and implement those mandates.
Bob Clegg, if hospitals get overrun and the deaths do spike, we passed 800,000 in the country this week. Experts are saying by March we're going to hit 1 million if Omicron, even if it's as predicted. Might a real bad January prompt another shutdown, do you think, or are we beyond that at this point?
I think, Mike, that the problem that a lot of these governors are seeing and why they're not putting out any new mandates or anything is that people, by and large, are just not going to abide by them. They you know, you see already with what President Biden's trying to do, you're getting lawsuits right and left being filed, and he actually is being shot down by the courts. And I think governors, and Desiree hit it, I mean, a lot of them are up next year. And they don't want to take the political heat of another shutdown. And I don't know how bad this would have to get for that to happen. But like you said, there's governors like in Colorado, Michigan, Democrat governors that were pretty hardcore in the beginning that are just saying, no, I don't think I'm going to do it this time.
Julie Carr-Smythe, I mean, many venues here in Columbus are requiring a vaccine card to see a show at, like, say, the Palace Theater or at OSU to see a performance there. Might these venues start saying, you got to show us you've gotten the booster as well?
Well, it very well could be. You know, we also are seeing some pushback on that. However, at the state house and other state houses around the country, people don't necessarily support what they're calling, you know, vaccine require, you know, showing passports or whatnot. But you know, it's a good way to go to kind of keep people safe, to just show that they've got the shot and add the booster. It, as the doctor said, you know, it does keep people as safe as we possibly can be. And, you know, we'll probably continue to see these reminders: social distancing, wearing your mask, taking these precautions, getting your hand sanitizer back out, and all the things that people were hoping were going away. But I think to Bob's point, who wants to take a political hit to shut things down and tell people some stuff that at this point they feel they already know? And now we've been living with this for nearly 2 years. And so, you know, it's a risk that they might not want to take.
Yeah. Our next topic: Governor DeWine has been holding quite a few news conferences around the state, handing out federal grant money. The money is going to police, drinking water projects, wastewater treatment plants. Republican governors all across the country are doing the same. The money is coming from the federal COVID relief package approved last spring. And Democrats are quick to point out the irony that these same Republican leaders strongly oppose that package. The Republican leaders say even though they oppose the spending, their states deserve their fair share. Bob Clegg, this is just plain old politics. Vote no, but take the dough and pass out the dough, right?
Yep. Hey, you know, I like that Governor DeWine opposed it, because, you know, the last thing we need is more federal money being spent, especially with inflation at a 40 or 50-year high. But hey, if he hadn't taken that money, it would be going to those Democrat states like California, New York, who never get enough federal money and would be more than happy to take any of the money that Republican states would turn down, and they would spend it themselves. So for the people of Ohio, I think Governor DeWine did a great job by accepting the money and using it, because if he hadn't, somebody else would be using it.
Yeah, I think Ohio kind of breaks even, but those states that you mentioned, New York and California, often pay more into the federal budget than they take out, while states like Kentucky and some of the rural states take in more than they pay out. But Desiree Tims, Democrats are, you know, they vote against tax cuts, but, you know, many of their supporters still take advantage of those tax cuts when they come through. I'm thinking of the Trump tax cuts from a few years ago.
I think this is very different. This was an opportunity for the country to come together to vote on a package that would help us build back better. I think Ohioans all across the state are happy to have our roads fixed. We're happy to have more money into infrastructure, to fix the lead paint in housing and in schools and in water. This is something everyone supports. Every single Republican voted no. And now they're championing Democratic wins. I believe by playing by the rules, give credit where credit is due. Yay to the Democrats for doing the right thing and delivering for Ohio.
Julie Carr Smythe, this is not including the infrastructure money, which takes a little longer to come out. That was the one that was passed this past fall. That will come out perhaps in the spring and summer in the years ahead. I assume we'll see Governor. That was more bipartisan, so that might give Republicans some cover to say, you know, this was a bipartisan bill. Rob Portman helped negotiate it. Gives them a little more cover to tout those projects when they start coming around.
Right. And I mean, it is political on both sides, obviously. If, you know, the president is a Democrat and he wants to help Democrats spread all kinds of wealth across the country with his name attached to it over the months as they're trying to hold on to the Congress, that makes sense for him. Now, for the Republicans to be able to talk about supporting infrastructure as that comes forward, then that's going to be good for them. But I think it's fair in politics for people, as Desiree says, to point out the hypocrisy of not supporting it, but then taking the money and going around touting. Now, you know, to Bob's point, the money that DeWine is spending, he's spending on kind of a Republican priority, right? He's spending some of it on police and some public safety issues that are very near and dear to his heart. And so Bob's making a point that the governor can take Democratic passed money and spend it on a Republican priority.
But Bob Clegg, it was pretty shrewd for Mike DeWine to use Democratic passed money and then to say that Democrats want to defund the police, but we're spending money on the police. But he wouldn't have that money if Democrats hadn't approved it. Wasn't that a little bit unfair? Just a little bit?
I mean, if the Democrats wouldn't keep pushing defunding the police, we wouldn't have these issues, would we, Mike? But that's just something that, and I mean, obviously crime is now blown out of control, and in large part because of cutbacks in a lot of the major cities that they did over the last year or so. So I think the governor is just trying to help where there is, I mean, we have cities like Columbus and Toledo that are at murder rates that are highest ever in their history. And I think the governor is addressing that problem.
Desiree Timms, bottom line, improving drinking water systems around Ohio, that helps both Democrats and Republicans. So does it really matter who claims the credit for it if it's going to help folks?
I think it does. I think if you show up to work every day and you put in your 8 hours a day, and then every other week when you show up to get your paycheck, imagine someone coming in cashing your check. You want credit for the work that you've put in, or at the very least, you want the opposition to stop attacking the good job that you're doing. Look, if Republicans want to support Democratic priorities, we welcome them into the fold. Supporting child tax credits, making sure police officers get paid, our first responders get their due, as well, given all the hard work they've done during the pandemic. So come on into the fold and let's stop all the bickering, because bottom line, it looks like they agree with us.
All right, Congressman Jim Jordan's name keeps coming up as one of the congressional insiders that may have tried to at least delay the certification of Joe Biden's election, if not overturn it completely. Jordan reportedly met with the president's team shortly after the election to strategize on how to question the results of key states. He also forwarded a text message to Trump's chief of staff, which advised Vice President Mike Pence to discard electoral votes he believed to be unconstitutional. Pence refused to do that. Bob Clegg, where is the line between advocating strongly for your candidate, the candidate of your party, and crossing over to, thwarting the will of the voters and overturning an election with no evidence that there was anything wrong?
Well, it's been pretty obvious for the last year that Congressman Jordan does not believe that Joe Biden was legitimately elected. I mean, that's his belief. He has not stepped away from that. He admitted, or he said, that those were his text messages. He's not trying to hide from any of this. He's a member of Congress. Congress would have to be the ones that would have to decide if his activities go over the line or not. And they obviously haven't felt that he has, because they're not doing anything or even talking about trying to do anything to him to either strip away committees or try to expel him from the House even. So I don't think there is a line that's been crossed. I think the Democrats, though, have to be careful. I mean, they've already stripped a couple of Republican members of committees so far this session, and their problem is going to be a little over a year from now. They're going to be in the minority, and who knows what Republicans will do to Democrat members in the next Congress. There's already been talk about certain members that espouse anti-Semitic views that may have to, either tone it down or they'll pay the consequences. So I think Nancy Pelosi is trying to take this very carefully and not cause a situation where her own members a little over a year from now will pay the price also.
Desiree Timms, should Democrats be worried about that? Are they playing too much into the politics of this? There are two Republicans on this committee looking into the January 6th insurrection, but they were not the Republicans that the party leaders wanted. They were Republicans who opposed Donald Trump. Are Democrats playing too much politics with this?
I think the Democrats and the two Republicans, like Congresswoman Liz Cheney, are coming together to save democracy. This is about ensuring that we do not infringe on the right to vote, that we respect the voters' choices, and that Joe Biden won the election what we're seeing and what we've seen from these text messages and the transcripts from the likes of Congressman Jim Jordan is a threat to our democracy. And I don't think that's political at all. It is a must that we save democracy and that we protect the integrity of our elections and the right to vote.
Julie Carr Smythe, is there any way this hurts Jim Jordan back here in Ohio? His district right now is very gerrymandered. It stretches from suburban Cincinnati all the way to Lake Erie. His new district will be less gerrymandered, but still probably not all that competitive, a little more competitive than now likely. Any chance this comes back to home here if he had a solid, strong opponent next year?
Well, I mean, it does damage his brand a little bit. The revelation to me of the text messages had to do with the fact that those who were behind the scenes hyper worried about what was going on in the midst of the insurrection on January 6th, including members of Fox News's staff and these kind of things, that that kind of behind the scenes showed average people that that there are two versions of this story: what they believe in their hearts and what they're saying out loud. And any of us who cover politics know that's the case with a lot of people in politics. Yeah. And so I just think that could possibly be a damaging thing for Jordan, that he didn't seem to be following his heart there, but was trying to help a narrative on Trump's behalf.
Yeah. A bill allowing Ohioans to carry a hidden gun with no permit and no training is a step closer to becoming law. The Senate this week passed a bill that also removes the requirement that people inform police they have a gun in their vehicle when they get pulled over. The House has passed a similar measure. Supporters say there is nothing in the Constitution that requires gun owners take training. Opponents, which include police organizations, say the bill would put people and officers at risk. Governor DeWine says he needs to know more before deciding whether or not he would sign it. Desiree Timms, there is nothing in the Constitution that says that gun owners should be trained, and the Supreme Court has affirmed we have the right to carry a gun. Is this just a strict interpretation of the law?
This bill is very extreme and it's dangerous. I don't know what more Governor DeWine needs to see and hear when we have police officers who are putting their lives on the line every single day, who testified against this. It is deadly, and a lot of innocent Ohioans will be at risk of losing their lives if this bill is signed into law.
Bob Clegg, there is the term well-regulated militia in the Second Amendment, so they do allow for regulations, you would think. Isn't a license and training for carrying a hidden weapon, isn't that a common sense regulation that should be on the law? Or do you think Governor DeWine will veto this because of that?
I don't know whether the governor's going to veto it or not. We already have background checks for individuals that want to purchase a gun, even though that doesn't seem to be stopping the illegal purchasing of guns, which are used in a large amount of the crimes that are committed in our state and our country. Concealed carry instructions, I think it's great if people want to take it. Once again, though, I don't think that the people that are using guns to commit murders and things like that are people that have gone through concealed carry classes. So I don't see that as doing anything to stop or take down the murder rate that's occurring throughout our country and throughout the state of Ohio. We have a Second Amendment right, and the regulation of that right, I think, is up to every individual state to determine for themselves. And if our state legislature wants to allow it without any instruction, then the governor's going to have to make a decision what he wants to do.
Julie Carr Smythe, where is this coming from? Is it just the continued effort to reduce restrictions on firearms, or is there a large call among concealed carry permit holders to do away with the permits? And where is this coming from?
Well, back when we put the concealed carry system in place, these sort of training requirements and licensing were part of a compromise. I mean, the politics of the state were different then. The politics at the State House were a little more divided, and people were trying to accommodate. We didn't really know at that point what the impact would be. And so what's happening is that the state house is more conservative. This is part of a step-by-step sort of gradually take away some of the regulations that were initially promised in order to get concealed carry passed. And they have the support now. Now, given that, still, we don't know that this is going to pass. We have a Senate version and a House version, and sometimes things fall down, or sometimes the compromise will be used, or the issue will be used as a bargaining chip for something they care more about. Certainly, Mike DeWine has been trying to be supportive of not exactly gun regulation, but what they're calling sensible steps to make Ohio safer. And so whether he wants to be seen as attached to this, I don't know.
Yeah, it would put him in a tough spot with him facing a primary opponent next spring. Our last topic, the state of Ohio could expand its medical marijuana program. The state Senate has approved a bill that would extend growing licenses to a handful of processors who were denied permits back when the program was getting started in 2018. The bill would increase the number of dispensary licenses in Ohio, it would increase with the size of some cultivators' facilities, and it will allow physicians to prescribe medical marijuana to a patient for any medical condition that could be helped by medical marijuana. The expansion comes as a group is collecting signature to legalize recreational marijuana. Desiree Timms, it seems like the medical marijuana system is working. Is this the time to build on it and expand it a bit?
Absolutely. Ohio's medical marijuana program is restrictive, and we need to be more expansive, and we need to make sure we're also really aggressive with criminal justice reform in that regard as well. So I support a lot of the legislation that will expand access to marijuana, medical marijuana, and studies that will allow our economy to grow along with it. So I'm all for it.
Bob Clegg, the doctors can prescribe medical marijuana for any condition that can reasonably be helped by marijuana. Is that going too far the other way, where the law is kind of limiting right now?
No, we've discussed this before, this whole medical marijuana issue, and I've always been of the belief that the state of Ohio has not been very encouraging of medical marijuana. They were more or less pushed into this by the ballot initiative that was on the ballot in 2015. Which I was involved with, and they knew they had to deal with medical marijuana because people seemed to like that aspect of it, and they knew it was going to happen sooner or later. So they were more or less, dragged into it, kicking and screaming. And I also support, if doctors feel that they have a patient that can be helped with medical marijuana, then why not be able to prescribe it?
Hey, you wonder also the timing of this coming as this recreational pot effort is really getting going, and it could possibly be on the ballot next November. We'll see how the two merge and if they are connected. It is time for our final off-the-record parting shots. Desiree Timms, you're up first.
Be on the lookout in the coming days for a opinion from the Supreme Court of Ohio regarding the redistricting and gerrymandering cases. I'm really optimistic and hopeful that the court will do something to remedy the harm that the Republicans did.
Bob Clegg, your final thought.
The advertising industry is looking at 2022 and trying to figure out where the biggest growth in advertising on TV, radio, and digital is going to be. And they've identified two main areas: political and sports betting, which may or may not be related.
DraftKings, let's see who's going to be the next U.S. Senator. Julie Carr Smythe, you're up.
We had a Democratic entrant into the Attorney General's race this week, Jeffrey Crossman, who's a state representative facing a former two-term auditor and current AG incumbent, Yost. So we're still watching, though, to see what the Democrats are going to bring together in terms of a full slate, and what the makeup of that slate will be in a lot of ways, in terms of racial and ethnic diversity, in terms of experience, and where those folks are going to come from.
Yeah. If you recall, last year at this time, a Cincinnati Bengals fan was petitioning to use medical marijuana to alleviate his disappointment over his team's fate. Well, the Bengals are doing better, and now with this new proposed law, maybe Browns fans can petition the state to use medical marijuana to overcome their disappointment should they not make the playoffs, along with the Bengals, who are playoff bound, I believe. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter occasionally, and you can get each episode on demand at our website, wosu.org. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.